Hello everyone, welcome to the Burning Archive live stream. This is a channel where you can chat with me and learn how to see the world more clearly with some quality world history. We try to look at geopolitics, look at culture, look at world history, look at good history books, and look at some of the big topics in the news, the sort of, history changing events, of which there seem to be an awful lot happening right now. And one of those events is what we're going to talk about today on the live stream, and that is the summit meeting between the leaders of Russia and China, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and of course not just them, but many of their sort of, leading ministers and officials, very significant number of people like Sergei Shoigu and others turned up in Beijing with Vladimir Putin and talked about all those things. So welcome everyone. Do say hello in the chat. I do try to respond to all my comments. Excuse me a minute, I just had a little bit of indigestion right there. You probably don't really want to know that, but there we go. So the Xi Putin Summit has been, I guess, messaged or symbolized. The optics of it have been very much dominated by a gesture right at the end when, or towards the end, when Xi Jinping was farewelling Vladimir Putin, and he reached out and embraced him in a hug. The hug of a changed world, a hug to change the world, the hug that changed the world. What is it? Or is it just a bromance of dictators, as some people have said? We'll talk about all that. We'll talk about the optics, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the substance and the culture of these sort of diplomatic relationships between Russia and China, and the extent to which they may well represent, I guess, a new model of international relations for other major powers, and indeed the whole world, for India, for Europe, for the United States, even for little old Australia. So I will get into all of that in a second. And so we'll look at the hug, the symbolism, we'll look at the substance of what leaders have said. And I think a lot of the commentary around this summit has been a little bit short of discussion of substance. And then we'll dig into one particular aspect of the developing relations that was focused on a lot in the Putin Summit, and that was the culture. Not just economics, not just military stuff, not just, I guess, big financial and strategic issues, a lot of which are a little bit hard to engage with if you're not, terribly across some of those issues. A lot of people have opinions on, but not a lot of people know an awful lot about. But we all know a lot more about culture, and one of the big focuses of this meeting was deepening and broadening and enriching of cultural ties between Russia and China. And I'll have a bit of a look at that and why it's important, and why it also relates to the final aspect of what I'll be talking about in today's video live stream, is the what this event signals in the broader sweep of world history. Is this the birth? Is this the final critical moment? Is this like the Yalta Summit of the beginning of the multipolar world? Is it just another meeting, or what is it? Does it actually represent what they say it is, which is a celebration of a new model of diplomatic relations between great powers. We'll talk about all of those things in today's video. So do hang in there and stay with me, and I'll just double check we've got any chat comments. Do say hello on the chat. Can I also say to all those who tuned into my video from last week on Dr. Jaishankar's comments that the era of US dominance has come effectively to an end, and that Bharat is standing up to the world. Let me say thank you to everyone who watched and all the people who comments. I think it's something like 1,500 or 1,500 comments on that video, and I'm deeply, deeply appreciative. I hope I've said Bharat better this week, and I have also been practicing my pronunciation of Tiruvallava. I obviously didn't do it quite as well as I should have, but Tiruvallava, and I might even be looking to do a little video on Tiruvallava at a later point in the year. So thanks so much for everyone who tuned in and commented. An enormous range of views. I actually learn a lot from those comments, so please do throw in your comments as well as everyone who's commented on my other videos. And of course you can see who I am. I'm Jeff Rich from the Burning Archive. You've got my Substack details there, jeffrich.substack. I have a free weekly sort of newsletter email. It's kind of an essay on world history topics. And if you subscribe to that, you'll get that absolutely free. I sort of do like 1,500 word essay every Saturday morning. And I also, for paid subscribers, do an additional one on Wednesdays. And, those who subscribe free get most of that essay as well. So that's something you might want to do. I'm primarily a writer. I do the YouTube channel to, help find an audience, and I'm really, really glad that I've found you as a viewer as well. So thanks so much for tuning in, and all the details about how you can support me and all that sort of thing. My books and other writing and whatnot are in the video description below. Okay, so let's get into the first part of the discussion, which is that hug, the hug that I featured in the thumbnail for this video, the hug of a changed world, or a hug to change the world. Let's see what it is. And I'll just flip over here to my other sort of screen, because I've prepared some material for you to have a bit of a look at here on the on these things. So let me just make sure I've got it all working for you, which I have. And what I might do is just sort of make my... It's not working. Why is it not working? Give me 1 second here, folks. It won't be long, and then we will be all good to go. I just didn't quite set it up properly in the a few minutes before the show. Rookie mistake there from a new YouTube live streamer. I hope you can forgive me. And there we are. Don't know why that's not showing properly. Sorry about this, folks. I just want to get it into the proper setup so you can see it better. There we are. Okay, so this is the moment. Shortly, as Xi Jinping is farewelling Vladimir Putin after the state visit to Beijing, big smile on both of their faces, big smile on both of the translators' faces, the Chinese and Russian translators. You can see Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi there in the background having a smiling chat as well. And they not only shook hands, they decided to go a little bit further, or I would say probably it was Xi Jinping who decided to go a little bit further and said, let's have a hug, let's embrace. You can see there the Russian translator with the beard looking with a bit of a smile saying, I wonder how Vladimir is going to respond to this. And the hug happened. Now, I don't have a really great photo of the hug. They all seem to be, licensed to the photography agencies. But the video of this moment of the hug has been broadcast all around the world. And in the Western press, it has been, trivialised, I guess would be the politest way to say it. I think this headline is from like the Daily Mail or the Sun or one of those, Daily Telegraph or one of those low quality British papers that seem to get a lot of coverage. And it says, cuddly tyrants, bizarre moment, Xi and Putin go in for 2 hugs in unprecedented touchy-feely embrace during despots' loving talks. And then we have, and then let me just switch over here. And then we have, so there's this hug, and many people have interpreted it as like a weird bromance sort of thing, but a lot of people have also said it symbolised the closeness of the relationship between Russia and China. And some of those who responded positively to the hug said that one of its significance, one of the things that was significant about it was that hugging is not particularly part of Chinese culture, that Xi Jinping doesn't hug many people. Now, I was always just that little bit sceptical of that idea, so I did have and if there are any viewers with kind of Chinese cultural background watching, why don't you throw in a chat and let me know whether it is really true that Chinese leaders, Chinese people don't hug all that much. But I certainly found that the evidence, the photographic evidence, was not really there for that claim. And if we go over, I will show you. So we have here a picture of Xi Jinping. I think it's the Prime Minister or President of Vietnam. A gentle hug there. He's obviously a much taller and larger man. He doesn't want to break his bones in that bear hug. And then we have Xi Jinping hugging some people of, I'm not quite sure where they are in China, but I think, one of the sort of, minority ethnic groups in China also hugging, very warmly the people, and many smiles about it. It doesn't look that un-Chinese sort of a behaviour to me right there. And then finally we have a not so far gone picture of Emmanuel Macron hugging Xi Jinping. So it's by no means unprecedented. It's by no means weird and weird cuddly tyrants as the British press want to say. Sophia. Fabulous. Really great comment here from Sophia Shakti. Thanks, Sophia, and thanks for supporting the channel, Sophia. It's great to see you commenting. You say, can you find analogy? Alexander Nevsky depended on the Golden Horde. Putin on China, by the way. President Xi has Mongol ancestry. This is so true. The Mongols are part of the shared, shared geopolitical, diplomatic, cultural heritage of China and Russia. There's been centuries-long relationships between, the separate states of China and Russia. But the Mongols, the various hordes, also were a form of empire or governments that actually joined together Russia and China for several hundred years. As Sophia mentions, Nevsky went to Mongolia to pay tribute to the Khan, and also and it was a crucial thing. And I did a video on another channel I did another video on the Mongols, which I might sort of come back to a bit later on. Great comment, Sophia. Thanks for that very much. Now let's look at some other hugs of world leaders before we get into the more serious stuff. Because if Xi and Putin's hug was weird, what about these hugs? There was this infamous hug between Joe Biden, looking intensely uncomfortable there, and Benjamin Netanyahu shortly after the events of October last year, the sort of Hamas terrorist attack, I guess. And I think this is from The Nation, a newspaper, I guess a progressive newspaper maybe, I think, in the United States. Biden's bear hug of Netanyahu is a disaster. And then we have Volodymyr Zelensky hugging perhaps soon to be exited British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who's just announced an election in the last couple of days, hugging Zelensky in what has not been criticised as a weird bromance in front of a helicopter announcing more arms for Ukraine. Then we have a rather awkward hug between Emmanuel Macron and Volodymyr Zelensky with, kind of a formed fist there, making sure there's a bit of a barrier between the two. And Zelensky, as always, posing for the camera. And then we have Bill Gates and Justin Trudeau hugging somewhat more distantly, but with Bill Gates having a Hug Me, I Save Lives t-shirt on. Then we have Ursula von der Leyen from the European Union also hugging somewhat distantly Emmanuel Macron, who seems to be rather fond of a hug. Narendra Modi here hugging Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and Vladimir Putin, and Barack Obama, who doesn't quite seem to be getting into the spirit of embracing India fully there. And then, of course, he also rather more enthusiastically was hugged by Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, and a little bit more comically by Joe Biden himself. A big old laugh there. All right, let's get out of the presentation then for a moment. I'll come back to the controls. Put this back on. So I hope you enjoyed that little tour through the hugs of diplomacy, and use that as a bit of a point of reflection on how misleading, I guess, some of the instant commentary in the press really is at times, both mainstream press and independent press. Some of the ridiculous interpretations of hugs and the hypocritical interpretation of hugs, which after all is a simple gesture of, I guess, friendship, which after all was one of the main symbolic purposes of the state visit of the Russian leaders to China. Okay, now there's a lot of competing views on the geopolitical implications of the hug between China and Russia, or more broadly, the new era of cooperation, as the Chinese and Russians say, the new partnership that is different and better than a military defensive alliance. The Financial Times said that this is an economic friendship that they can't quite seem to acknowledge without quotation marks, that could rattle the world. And they present it very much against the sort of background of Ukraine. And then we find the New Atlanticist, which is a kind of a magazine that's presented by the Atlantic Council, jumped quickly last week to, consult a group of what they called experts on how they react and what this new era, which again they have to put in quotation marks to sort of denigrate, what this new era of cooperation means for the world. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, they seem to imply. And again, they say increasingly a multipolar world and all that sort of thing. So it's hard for many of the sort of Atlanticist people in America to really acknowledge what's going on. That's also reflected in another similar kind of magazine called The Diplomat. There it says, in China, Russia's Putin emphasizes strategic and personal ties. Putin's visit underscored China and Russia's coordination to push forward, again in quotation marks, an emerging multipolar world. And then, by contrast, the journalist Pepe Escobar, writing before the summit, but with some sense of what was about to happen, really, spoke highly about the likelihood of this summit actually establishing a new global security order, and that this new security order, with a focus on the military kind of stuff, is part, I guess, of the jiu-jitsu Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are playing with the West. And he quotes a Chinese scholar saying, "This time, the barbarians are facing a 5,000-year continuing written civilization armed with Sun Tzu's Art of War. Mao thought Xi's dual circulation strategy, which I think is the kind of economic sort of strategy of China at the moment, Belt and Road, BRICS, renminbi, digitalization, Russia and China unlimited, the world's most powerful manufacturing industry, tech supremacy, economic powerhouse, and the backing of the global south. How could they ever win against that? And our friendly, beloved The Economist, ever a reliable indicator of, British aristocratic opinion, seems to say that the Xi-Putin partnership is not a marriage of convenience. It's one of vital long-term necessity. An autocratic bromance. Okay, so there we are. So what are we to make of all of that? And I think one of the aspects of it is a lot of the interpretation is grounded in a lot of historical myths. Framing this as an autocratic bromance in itself is trying to do that. It's trying to diminish the much, broader level of engagement institutionally, in terms of personnel, in terms of culture, in terms of economic, cultural and other relationships that actually exist between these countries, trying to present it as just kind of two dictators hugging it out. And on the Pepe Escobar sort of front, he gets rather carried away sometimes with his ideas about the multipolar world and is a little bit too influenced by the kind of interpretations of history that are grounded in Halford Mackinder, the whole, he who controls the heartland, Eastern Europe controls the heartland, he who controls the heartland controls the world island, i.e. Eurasia, and he who controls the world island, Eurasia, controls the world. And I've done a few videos on that, which you can check out on my channel. That kind of thinking is actually quite limited, but many of the commentators responding to the Xi-Putin summit have picked that up and have not picked up the, in a way, much shrewder comment that Sophia Shakti made about the long or the common institutional, cultural, political, diplomatic and economic legacy of the Mongols, of the Golden Horde, of the Mongol Exchange, as historian Marie Favreau says, of a prior era in which not just, murderous conquering Mongol barbarians on horses, but a highly sophisticated political culture which emphasised cultural exchange and models of, balanced governance with states rather than, domination of states. That's part of the common heritage in a way that is informs Xi and Putin's discussion. And you should absolutely check out my interview with Marie Favreau on her book, The Horde, How the Mongols Changed the World. It will change how you see the history of the Mongols. And good on Sophia Shakti for picking that up. Thanks so much, Sophia, for making that comment. Okay, so we've got some contrasting views there, haven't we? And what I'm going to do now is, rather than just talk about the optics of the hug and all that sort of thing, I want to talk about just give me 1 second, just checking something here on the whole technical side of streaming. Doing all this myself, so there's no safety net when you stream as a YouTuber all by yourself. But so I want to talk about some of the substance of what people said, because it has struck me that there's been a lot of huffing and puffing, either critically or supportively, about the meaning of the Putin Summit, the meaning of the declaration, but there hasn't been a lot of detailed assessment of what was actually said, what was actually agreed, what sort of actual actions are emerging about it. And without that, really people are just talking myths and theories. They're not really talking about the actual substance of what happened. And I think it's good to actually look at their actual words. Now, I have a background as a government official. I was a government official for 33 years, and I've drafted many communique over my years. Never international communiques, because I was a government official in the sort of provincial, state level of government in Australia. But the basic, there is something you learn about interpreting those kind of statements, I think, by doing it even at a subnational level. And there's some really interesting detail in what Xi and Putin said, both about the broad, I guess, principles of the emerging relationship between Russia and China, which I think will help us understand what it was really about much better, but also about one particular aspect that I do talk about a lot on this channel, which is the cultural relationships between states and great powers, the cultural relationships around the world, the exchange of culture around the world. There's plenty of channels that talk about the military side of things, the economic side of things. I think looking at the cultural side of things is actually really important. There's some American political journalist, I think, who famously said that culture is upstream of politics, that what happens in the culture flows down into politics a bit later. And you could say the same of economics, even potentially of military things. So looking at what these leaders are saying about culture is not just window dressing. I think it's actually really, really important. So I'm going to have a look at a bit of that now. Now, one of the difficulties in being able to talk about the substance of the agreement between Xi and Putin is that there was apparently what people were reporting to be a 12,000 word joint statement, joint communique, which has a long name that I can't quite find in my notes. But I searched for this, but I could not find it on no English translation of it. And I've heard people say it's 12,000 words, but I haven't really seen or heard anyone actually quote directly from it. So there may well be Chinese and Russian versions of that around. So if you are aware of that, let me know in a comment, either before or after the live stream, and I will check it out. I suspect it's simply a case that it hasn't been translated into English yet, and so that may happen in the next few days. Certainly looking at the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Hey Warwick, great! I'm really glad that you're tuning in. You might even know where this 12,000 word statement is. I'm pretty sure it hasn't been published yet. But what I am going to do is actually look at the words of the leaders in their joint press conference announcing the statement. There they are, actually at that sort of formal signing, not hugging, just shaking hands, looking not entirely comfortable with the camera. But in the joint press conference that Xi and Vladimir Putin gave on the state visit to China of Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping outlined 5 principles of the new model of relationship between the new type of cooperation between China and Russia. And I'm going to just sort of go into a little bit of a discussion of those, because most of the discussion has just been, abstract, I guess. But this does look at the actual details of things. And there are 5 principles. One is about, and I've sort of boiled these down. They're expressed a little bit more wordily than this, which may partly be just a translation matter from the Chinese, but these are effectively what they were saying. And before I outline them, I guess one of the things I noticed about these principles is they're more, they're almost stated as objectives. Sometimes when people talk about principles, they say, they're sort of motherhood statements, parenthood statements. But these, I think, are more explicit and practical objectives about how China and Russia want to conduct international relations, and more than that, how they perhaps want to rebuild the model of diplomacy, of the international system, of the world order, if you like, over the next few years. So they say one key principle is mutual respect and support on core interests. Another is the win-win approach for new architecture of cooperation. A third is to maintain centuries-old friendly ties. The fourth is strategic cooperation to set global governance on the right track. And the fifth is the settlement of hotspots in interest of justice and truth. And the last one is where issues of Ukraine and Israel and Gaza, Palestine are discussed, as well as, I think, potentially Taiwan. Okay, let's look at the mutual respect statement first. And here there is a real focus on how China and Russia's approach really is a new model enabling major powers to develop their relations on the principles of respect and equity. And there's some detail here from the press conference where Xi Jinping, and you can actually watch, there's a English voiced version of this press conference, or maybe it's just auto-translated, that you can also watch. But he says, our two countries are committed to acting in the spirit of non-alignment with any blocs, rejecting confrontation and refraining from targeting any third countries, while demonstrating our steadfast commitment to confidence-building measures on political matters, respecting the development trajectories we choose for ourselves, and firmly supporting each other as we strive for shared prosperity and revival. It is there's a clear contrast there, I guess, to how the United States tends to deal with other countries. The second principle and my sort of throat's getting a little bit dry here. But so just bear with me 1 second. The second principle is about the win-win approach. And here we have the general comment that so the second principle consists of promoting a win-win approach to shaping a new architecture of mutually beneficial cooperation. They refer to, refers to the growing trade between the countries, the growing common interests and shared interests and initiatives between the countries. And it says that it's essential that we carry on with our efforts to streamline our cooperation and inject even more positive momentum in trade and other traditional domains of our cooperation. We must support networks promoting fundamental research, unleash our cooperation potential in high technology sectors, step up our cooperation on border crossings, transport and logistics, and ensure the stable operation of global manufacturing and supply chains. Again, it's I guess this is the pretty well-known, widely discussed broadening out of the sort of investment, trade, economic relationships between both China and Russia, but also China and most countries in the world. Then there is the third sort of principle, and this one really took my eye because I'm a bit of a culture vulture, and he says that, as he says, the third principle deals with maintaining our centuries-old friendly ties and passing on this friendship from one generation to another. And before I read this, let me just quickly, for a moment, just show you my face again. And this is a really interesting thing because I guess it is Xi Jinping has established, I think it's called a Global Civilizations Initiative, and similarly Vladimir Putin has more than one time, quite a few times actually, talked extensively about the importance of the diverse cultural identity of Russia. They both talk about the idea of a civilization state, as indeed, for example, does India talk about India being a civilization state, or at least many people in India do. In Russia's case, this concept of a civilization state is, I think, formally expressed in its foreign policy, and in China's case, there is this formal diplomatic initiative about honouring, accepting, working with a wide variety of civilizations. And I think in a way this is feeding into the whole idea that my interpretation of what this whole event is really about, which is that it is about accepting that, if you like, the new cultures of diplomacy, the new cultures of international relations are not just determined in Washington. They're no longer just determined in the West. There is a new international system that's going to form from a blend of all these different cultures and civilizations around the world. And what's more, this, I guess, statement is a historically informed, a culturally informed rebuttal of the common idea that is put by American geostrategists that somehow or other the sort of, clever chaps from Washington, D.C. can, trick Russia or China into dumping their partners and siding with the United States against them. What Xi and Putin are saying is that there's a centuries-long relationship between Russia and China, that, if you like, that relationship, those friendly ties, those diplomatic institutions, those economic exchanges, those cultural exchanges, date from before 1776, from before the formation of the United States of America, and are not easily displaced. So I think it's really quite a significant dimension of this, and I will talk about that a little bit more in 1 second. And let me just bring up the quote. So, friendly ties. China and Russia both pride themselves on their ancient history and outstanding cultures. People from average Chinese families read Pushkin's and Tolstoy's books, while traditional Chinese culture, including the Beijing opera and Tai Chi, has been very popular among Russians. And we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later in the show. Let's go to the fourth principle, which is a very significant one in terms of reshaping the order. There's interpreting the significance of this as a remaking of the global order, just global governance. And here we, if I just go back to the media statement, Xi says that the fourth point is that we must act in the spirit of strategic cooperation to set various visions of global governance on the right track. Now, again, as I was saying, that these principles are not just saying there should be good global governance. There's a concrete objective there. There's an objective about rebalancing the global governance of the world to get it back on the right track. China and Russia, he says, and this is not in the quote part I have, so let me just read this to you. China and Russia have been firmly advocating a UN-centred system of international relations and an international order based on international law. We have been coordinating our positions within multilateral platforms such as the United Nations, APEC and the G20 to promote the emergence of a multipolar world and economic globalisation based on genuine multilateralism, not on the unilateralism of the unipolar moment. Our two countries are committed to acting in the spirit of non-alignment with any blocs, rejecting confrontation and refraining from targeting any third countries, while demonstrating our steadfast commitment. I feel I might have actually accidentally made a error in my quotes there, but anyhow, you can get the sense. So they are saying, let's go back to the true spirit of the United Nations. Let's get the United Nations global governance working the way it should have been. Let's put an end to this sort of 30 years of unipolar madness from America. And then the fifth principle that they talk about is to deal with promoting a political settlement for hotspots in the interest of truth and justice. And here they say today's world is still plagued by Cold War mentality, aspirations to securing a unilateral hegemony, bloc-based confrontation and power politics pose a direct threat to peace and security for all countries around the world. And as a result of statements like this, many of the press in the West including like the New York Times, chose to say that Xi and Putin were defying the United States international rules-based order. And I think you can see that if they were defying it, it was perhaps in a spirit of seeking a rebalancing of the world order in a more peaceful direction, in a multipolar direction, in a direction that is more genuinely in the spirit of the United Nations Charter. And I think there is also quite a pointedness to their references here to Russia and China offering a new model of great power relationships, indeed great power neighbouring relationships. Let me just bring up the little slide here again, and because they say that China and Russia have served as a role model by showing others ways of building state-to-state ties of a new kind and working together as two major neighbouring powers. Indeed, here they say, now, I emphasise that, working together as two major neighbouring powers. Now, if we say that there are 5, great states, great powers in the world today, the United States of America, Russia, China, India, I would say, and I would say collectively the European Union. I don't think any single one of the states of Europe can be called a major power, but collectively the European Union, bigger population, bigger economy than the United States, I think, and it is the neighbouring great power to, of course, Russia, and it over the last few years has pursued a policy of aggression, I guess, really towards Russia, relentless eastward expansion of its military arm, NATO, towards the Russian border. And here in this section, they in talking about this new model of relationships, they say China hopes that peace and stability will return to the European continent soon and is ready to constructively contribute to making this happen. As we say in China, tree bark forms by the accumulation of soil, while an accumulation of water creates oceans. It is thanks to their efforts over the past 75 years that China and Russia have been building upon their centuries-old friendship and comprehensive cooperation to generate powerful momentum which enabled them to overcome all challenges and reach new heights. This statement comes, days, weeks after Xi Jinping had, travelled to Europe and met with Macron, with Vučić of Serbia and Orban of Hungary. And perhaps there is a message there that he also delivered to those European leaders, that you too could follow a different new model of cooperation, of mutual respect, of friendly centuries-long ties, of just global governance in your relationships with Russia, rather than pursuing this sort of reinforcement of the sort of unilateral movement, this reinforcement of the American century, this reinforcement of what has proved to be a very destabilising set of ideas around international order. And I think, to me, this is the really crucial point about the Xi-Putin summit. I don't think it's really a challenge to the West. I don't think it's a seeking to overturn the West. I think it's a constructive set of steps forward to say, well, this is a new model, a new culture, a new set of institutions to take international relations forward in a more cooperative way. And if it's embraced by our neighbours, or Russia's neighbours in Europe, if it's embraced by our neighbours in the West Pacific, or those US military bases, then perhaps the world will be a much safer place. And I think that's really the really crucial dimension of it there. So I hope everyone's enjoying the show. I'm just going to have a little bit of a breather here for 1 second and have a quick drink of Coke. And then I hope, I'd be really interested if you do have some comments or ideas on whether that interpretation of the Xi-Putin summit is correct. If you sort of say so either in the chat right now, or if you're viewing subsequently, as I found most people do. Huge, wonderful audience for my last video on the sort of end of US dominance. Do leave us a comment on your interpretation of that idea. I'd really be interested in how people see it around the world. I do see this this idea as something of a it's a positive cultural model, I think, for how to conduct diplomacy. It's not just a power play. And that is perhaps why culture was such a key dimension of it. It's why culture was one. Culture and the friendly ties, the people exchanges, as people like to say in the West. Why respect for different cultures and different civilizations is so much at the heart of Chinese foreign policy, of Russian foreign policy as well. Okay, let me just say a few words about culture, because culture was a big dimension, not just of the principles and the statements, but also of the actual visit itself. Now, there we have a little picture of Xi and Vladimir Putin. I think there was, some video of this too, not only of them hugging, but of Xi and Putin walking around. I think it's the Central Lake in Beijing. I think it is Lake Huhai. Again, let me know if I've got that wrong. And they also inaugurated an event which was the years of I've lost my notes here. The years of China and Russia culture, both this year, 2024, and 2025. And there was a kind of a gala concert there, and you can see the picture up the top of a panda bear and a Russian bear, both dressed in traditional costumes, holding hands. And I can't read the Chinese, but the Russian there and on the big banner behind the two leaders says solemn or formal ceremonial opening of the year of Russian and Chinese culture. The concert to honour 75 years of the beginning of diplomatic relationships between our two countries. Really, I could even say it in Russian, but I won't sort of try my luck today. I'm still learning, but that's not too bad. And then you can see the This is one of the scenes from this gala concert with the representation of, many of the iconic images of Moscow, including, of course, the statue of the two people there who sort of, helped Russia survive the time of troubles. There's a picture of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping enjoying the concert. And at the event, Vladimir Putin gave a speech where he talked about the nature of this year of culture of Russia and China, timed to the anniversary of our bilateral relations. The Soviet Union, I believe, was the first country to actually recognise the People's Republic of China back in 1949. Of course, supportive of the Communist Party. It took the United States of America another, it was 71 or 72, whatever it was, even potentially later than that. So another 20-odd years before they got around to doing it. A bit cheeky of them to try to say that they get to decide who's friends and who's not between Russia and China. And this program is going to have, festivals, museums, fairs, and sporting competitions. Also, crucially, Putin says, I'd like to emphasize that this program also includes China's national contest for the knowledge of the Russian language. I'm sure that all these events will receive an enthusiastic response in China. Indeed, the names of Pushkin, Gogol, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, and Rachmaninoff are well known in China. They have not been cancelled in China the way some people sought to cancel them in the West. Their statues are not being torn down in China the way they were in Ukraine. And then he refers to how popular Soviet songs were in the People's Republic of China, including Katyusha. And he says, I've heard more than once how Chinese friends emotionally sing these well-known and popular tunes, not only in our country, but also in China. Perhaps he is referring there to shamans, Ya Ruski. In turn, in Russia, the interest in Chinese culture is not limited to the use of Chinese motifs in decor, architecture, study of the Chinese language, tea ceremonies, the art of making China, or say in Wushu, modern Chinese cinema, painting and books by Chinese authors are becoming increasingly more popular. So again, it's also about language. And I think if Warwick Powell's still listening, or viewers might recall that when I discussed Australia-China relationships, Australia-Asia relationships with Warwick a couple of months ago, one of the ways in which many people in Australia sought to deepen and strengthen diplomatic and cultural and economic ties between Australia and Asian countries, primarily East Asian countries, was to improve language learning, to have more Australians learn language. Now that, I would say, is a key part of what's going on here as well. There's a deepening of the language learning between the two cultures. English's sort of, dominance of the diplomatic cultural world is perhaps starting to fade. And then there's a few more comments there from Vladimir Putin that I also have. I also noted that the Xinhua news agency reported Lu Wingchang, the Vice Minister of Culture and Tourism of China, saying Gorky, Maxim Gorky, the famous Russian writer who preceded the revolution and the Russian Revolution, and kind of was supportive with some doubts about the Russian Revolution in 1917. And Lu Xun are great literary giants and ideological giants of their respective countries. Their writings carry profound insights and strong calls for human nature and society. Their shared dialogue symbolises the blending and mutual learning of the cultures and national spirits of China and Russia, carries our common responsibility for the inheritance and development of civilizations, and witnesses the deep friendship between the two peoples. So I think you can see there the kind of oh, I've gone black. There we go. You can see the kind of importance, I think, of the cultural connection. You can see the range of references. I mean, how many people in my country know who Lu Xun is? I'm pretty sure the only thing I know about Lu Xun, I think it was he had a phrase that, lies are written in ink and truth is written in blood, or something like that. But if viewers know that quote better than I've been able to remember it, by all means do let us know with a comment either now or in the replay of the video. I'd love to hear from you. So I think it's this whole emphasis on cultural exchange is really, really important. It's more than just window dressing. It's more than just a gala concert, some popular songs and all that kind of thing. It is integrated into the thinking about the Global Civilizations Initiative of China. It's integrated into the idea that Russia is not just a country, it's a civilization state, and it won't be dictated to by the West, which just assumes that it is the one and only civilization state of the world. And it also has a profound, I guess, practical significance. More Russians and more Chinese will learn each other's languages. More tourism will go on between Russia and China. There is already a lot of tourism between Russia and China. I know when I visited Russia in 2019, it was very, very evident that there's a large, Chinese tourism in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But so there is an economic dimension between these cultural ties, and a practical dimension. But I also think it's about the seizing back of initiative in the world of the cultures that are outside the West. You see the same kind of idea expressed in the way in which in India, Narendra Modi refers to India or Bharat as the mother of democracy, with some historical and cultural justification on the basis of texts and institutions and history and all the rest of it. So there is a real sense in which the non-Western world is reasserting itself and saying that it's not just the formal rules, the voting procedures, or the economic relationships between countries that need to change in this new multipolar world. It's also the mentality, the culture, the diplomatic culture. All of those things are really very much changing. And that brings us to my final sort of summary aspect of the discussion, which is really about what does all this mean in the scheme of world history. I mean, my channel is a bit of a blend of a culture and geopolitics and history channel. And do make sure you like, share and subscribe. I really ought to do that more often, shouldn't I? And let me also just add in there, I also cover all those sort of topics in my Substack, which you can subscribe to for free at jeffrich.substack.com. And I'll just bring, there we go, jeffrich.substack.com. You can see all the details there. So you can join my newsletter. I write a weekly newsletter and also an additional thing for paid subscribers. So you get at least like 1.5, if you subscribe for free, you get kind of 1.5 essays from me on world history, literature, culture, and how it's playing out in global affairs today every week. So make sure you subscribe to jeffrich.substack.com. You can also support me if you like by going to the sort of links in the video description. You can hit the thanks button and contribute directly via YouTube. You can support me just by clicking the like button on YouTube now, because that helps boost me in the algorithm. And anyone critical of America on YouTube, it's a little bit suspicious of whether they get pushed down in the algorithm, but maybe I'm wrong. And also you can go to the sort of buy me a coffee and other sort of links there. So all those things are things you can do. So a little bit of a pause there. Let me have a quick drink while we just check whether there have been any more chats while I've been talking relentlessly for an hour or so. And let me just go back to this part of the thing. I'm still learning how to do all this live streaming. I guess some people are pretty amazing how they can do sort of 2-hour live streams and appear not to have any sort of breaks for, I don't know, coffee or drinks or whatever. But I hope I'm doing it okay. Do let me know in the comments if where you're from and what you're listening to and what your perspective on this is. I've found some of the comments on the last video on the end of US exceptionalism really, really interesting from people all around the world, and I'd love to hear your perspective, because I think it's good for people all around the world just to talk about these things, not just in the big geostrategic dimensions, but also in the cultural dimensions, and to ensure that there's that those sort of voices of mutual respect of different cultures, different perspectives, diplomatic perspectives all around the world. Okay, so what does the Xi-Putin Summit mean in terms of world history? How significant is it? Is it just a tyrant's bromance? Is it the, like the Yalta Summit that is, setting the parameters of the new era of the multipolar world? Is it just a meeting? Is it a sign that there is, as I think it's Belina Chetkovska, I can't quite remember her name, but I think she's an Austrian geopolitical analyst, who says there is a new, I guess, pair of blocks of the West in what she calls the Dragon Bear, the sort of combined relationship between China and Russia. Is China just pretending to be friends, as a lot of the Western press seems to be saying, and sort of being a bit patronising towards its junior partner Russia? Or, as some people have been saying, including like Alexander Mercouris from the Duran, this is a sign of a new integrated Eurasia. that there will be like a integrated Eurasian economic space. It's a popular idea, I guess, that sees this coming together of China and Russia as the beginning of this new empowered Eurasia that is all one. But I personally, although I can see how that there's a rebalancing, I guess, between the Atlanticist and the Eurasian powers, that's certainly the case. I don't think that the principles that are outlined in this the statement really represent an integrated single Eurasian space. It's explicitly saying we don't believe in blocks. We believe in the global governance system as it was meant to be in the United Nations, not as it has become over the last 30 or 40 years. So I don't think that we really are looking at an integrate. We are certainly looking at, more investment and infrastructure and all that sort of thing. But that is also just, the rising of the boats. That is the re-energizing of these major cultures of the world, and a move away from the sort of era where everything was determined in Washington and London and Paris and all the rest of it. And what's more, I think that kind of thinking, which, to some degree has been expressed by people at the Duran, and to some degree is expressed by people like Pepe Escobar and a number of other popular YouTube analysts. Danny Haifong is always saying, I think he had some sort of headline, "This changes everything," or "This is a game changer." Every second video is talking about how everything is changing everything. I think this kind of thinking is often very grounded in the old logic of Halford Mackinder that, the control of the heartland, control the world island, control the world by controlling Eurasia. And it's sort of like the reverse logic of that. Well, if Eurasia gets its act together, it can control the world from within by integrating into a single Eurasian space and finally throw off the yoke of the oceanic powers. As I have described in some of my other videos on Halford Mackinder, I think that thinking is based on fundamental misunderstandings. It's based on, frankly, I don't particularly like the term racist, but let's say racist views. You read Halford Mackinder's Geographical Pivot of History and you realise he was contemptuous of the Asiatic horde, and what's more, he was ignorant, despite his claim to have discovered the laws of geography and the laws of history. He was ignorant of the real nature of the Mongol Empire, the political, cultural, diplomatic traditions that emerged from the horde, as Sophia Shakti referred to earlier in the show, and as Marie Favreau discusses in her book, The Horde, How the Mongols Changed the World, which she also discussed with me on the channel, and you can check that out in one of the on my channel's sort of site. So I don't think we're really seeing this kind of flip from a oceanic power world to a Eurasian power world, despite the ideas of Pepe Escobar and others. We're certainly seeing a shift to a multipolar world, but as I argue, the world has always been multipolar. We're just seeing more clearly how many parts of the world have sources of power that perhaps they forgot about over the last 30 years, while the sort of unipolar, the unilateral moment of the United States sort of dominated the world. What we're seeing is power has been more widely redistributed. That was one of the points that Dr. S.J. Shanker was making, as I discussed in my video last week about, the end of US dominance. The gap between the major countries of the world is not that great. The US is not number one on every factor. It's not the biggest economy by PPP terms. It's not the most powerful military. It's not the most diplomatically influential country anymore, I doubt. And as these cultural reassertion of many parts of the world, China, Russia, Africa, Pan-Africanism, Niger and Gabon and all that sort of thing, throwing France out of West Africa, the Sahel, as these cultural sort of winds of change, this resurgence of the non-Western cultures of the world, as that proceeds, we're seeing a different kind of world. We're seeing a different flow of ideas and people and resources around the world. It's no longer a world in which the West rules. The West, it's no longer really a simple world of the West and the rest. It's no longer a simple world of globalization being Westernization. Now those other cultures, those other civilizations are reshaping the world. They're reshaping the world of economy, of technology, of culture, and of war. Iranian drones, Russian military tactics, all the rest of it have changed or adapted perhaps more quickly to the new character of war as revealed in the conflict in Ukraine than the sort of old-fashioned NATO shock and awe combined arms operations. So flow of ideas and resources has changed. The nature of globalization itself has changed. What the new blend of the politics and institutions and culture of the world will be has changed significantly, and American primacy, I guess, as we discussed in last week's video, and authority has collapsed. It's sort of like that. I don't know if you know, but there's the great Japanese director Kurosawa made a magnificent film based on Shakespeare's Macbeth. I think it was called Throne of Blood. I don't know the Japanese word for it, but there's a brilliant scene where Macbeth, who kills the English king or the Scottish king, and then becomes the Scottish king himself, but then is consumed by guilt, and ultimately people revolt against him, and he's portrayed as standing on top of the top walls of his sort of castle, and being attacked from all sides. And America today looks like this power that has perhaps somewhat illegitimately claimed itself to be the top dog in the world, and is sort of being fired upon at all sides and looking increasingly desperate. It's no longer a 1v1 game in the world of international relations and diplomacy. It can't anymore be reduced to the sort of simple, economist game theory, strategic game theory, prisoner dilemma thing that has been the dominant, the hegemon and the challenger that has been the dominant mode of US thinking on policy and strategy for so long. And the concepts and the culture and institutions of the West are no longer the reference standard for diplomacy. You know, you still find many commentators on geopolitics say that, you know, diplomacy was invented, you know, sometime in sort of Renaissance Italy in the, 16th century or something like that, or 15th century. And that is so profoundly wrong. As Sophia Shakti mentioned earlier on, the Mongols, far from just being conquerors, were exceptional diplomats. There are centuries of, relationships between China and Russia, of diplomatic relationships between China and Russia, not just between those powers, but in India and in Southeast Asia and Africa, different diplomatic traditions. And so the vanity of the West, that it is the cultural reference standard for diplomacy, the international system, the ideas and the forms of the United Nations, I think is waning. And the new emerging powers of the world are demanding that their ideas, their culture, their concepts of how the world should be, should get along, the form of just global governance, that is increasingly coming to the fore. And I think, in a way, the best way to interpret this sort of Putin Summit is not really as a defiance of the West or the birth of a multipolar world, or even as the overturning of the American rules-based order. I think it's best understood as the respectful building of a changed system of international relations that is still, if you like, conservatively and stably built on the fundamental concepts of the United Nations, of international law and all that sort of thing. That is what they were actually saying. They're not saying we're going to throw it all up and we're going to get rid of America and all that sort of thing, or we're going to become a Eurasian bloc. We're saying, let's demonstrate how we offer a new model of great power relationships that can work within that framework of the United Nations, and put behind us the exceptionalist era of the American unipolar moment. In a way, I guess you could almost look back and over, say, the last 200 years of history of international relations, and I would say identify how many I've got here. 6 key moments when, if you like, there was a rebuilding, a refashioning of the international system, international institutions, and diplomatic norms that was of lasting significance. And in each one of them, it was a mix of new and old. There was the Congress of Vienna in 1815 at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, which were global wars too, and on the cusp of the era of steam globalization, the European powers established a concert of Europe, which was not just a concert of Europe, but was a concert of important global powers. Think about the reach of Russia in 1815, and Britain, obviously. Then there was the 1870s and like the scramble of Africa after the formation of Germany, the sort of new rebalancing of those European global empires. Then there was 1919 with Versailles, and obviously the collapse of Russian, Austro-Hungarian Imperial Germany empires in the First World War, and the attempt by America to create a sort of the first liberal rules-based order, with excluding both Japan and Germany and the Soviet Union, which, let's face it, was a fair bit of the world. And at that point, of course, China, century of humiliation and all that sort of thing. Then we have 1945 and Yalta and the formation of the United Nations. You could almost also say that there was a key moment in the mid-1950s with the Bandung Conference, with India, Iran, Indonesia, and the other states of the world starting to form the non-aligned movement, and a kind of acceleration of the decolonisation that the British and other European powers, and in a way the new American empire, were a little bit reluctant to support. That too, in a way, was a key moment of a refashioning of international norms, balances of power, the formation of the third world. And then finally, I guess, there is the critical period between 1989 and 1991, when Mikhail Gorbachev initiates the end of the Cold War, and for his troubles, America helps bring about the collapse of the Soviet Union. Of course, Mikhail Gorbachev contributed a fair bit to all of that himself. That's a story for another day. But then we have the birth of the unipolar moment, which I would redesignate perhaps as the unilateral moment. So I think we're not quite yet at the next big point of the refashioning of those, or rather the Putin Summit itself is not the crucial meeting that is refashioning those things. I think they're starting to communicate the ideas of what that new pattern of international relations that may well endure for, who knows, another 30 odd years will be, but we're still in the kind of conflict mode where, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in West Asia, the conflict in the Western Pacific, when the West, the United States especially, has not quite accepted the kind of principles outlined by Xi and Putin about refashioning the new world order. So I think it's clear that the American unilateral moment is over. I think America needs to realise how much it has destabilised the world, and perhaps look more positively at that hug between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and see it not as a threat, not as defiance, not as a weird autocratic bromance, but indeed, as Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping said, as a new model for how great powers can get along within a framework of win-win cooperation, of international law, of just global governance, and of deepening cultural exchange between each other, rather than seeking to cancel major cultures of the world. In a way, I think Xi and Putin are actually far from, throwing up the table of international order, bringing down the house and all that sort of thing. I think they're actually cautiously and stably trying to rebuild those institutions and norms that can actually support genuine global cooperation. And let us hope they will be successful. I think it will be really interesting after the Indian election is announced in early June to see what Narendra Modi does next in terms of both Russia and China, because many of his themes in terms of how diplomatic relations are conducted are articulated, if you like, by these 5 principles. It might be interesting to see if there's some sort of big initiative to ease the tensions and establish a better set of relationships between India and China, while not forming blocs the way the US wants. So I do think there is really a message there in this Putin Summit for Russia. I mean, not for Russia, for India, for Europe especially. As I said, I think there was a very pointed message there for Europe of saying you could have these kind of strong cooperative relationships with both China and Russia too, if you just dropped the wish for the United States to make you a frontline state, a frontline combatant, certainly against Russia, and increasingly in an economic way against China. So let us hope that all the great powers and the states and the citizens, indeed, of the world respond positively to that hug between Xi and Vladimir Putin, and certainly that the United States does not sort of pull the house down on its head as it senses its diminishing authority in the world. I really do think we are potentially some good news. There's some really frightening stuff going on at the moment in the world, some weird rhetoric coming out of some of the Americans about Taiwan and events in Iran and the events in Slovakia and all that kind of stuff. But I do think in some ways that we are potentially seeing a rebuilding of a more stable world order that is not based on the impossible to sustain, American dominance, the American unilateral moment, and we're potentially entering a creative period where the cultures of India, the cultures of Russia, the cultures of China, the Islamic world, of Southeast Asia, of Africa, of Latin America, or South America, South and Central America, can help reshape the culture and institutions of the world system in a way that is aligned with the United Nations Charter and is not exclusively seen as, doesn't exclusively see the United Nations Charter of international rules-based order as a product of Western civilization, of Western enlightenment, that actually sees the way all the countries and cultures of the world interact together as their shared heritage, just as, if you like, the Mongol exchange is the shared heritage of Russia, China, Central Asia, and indeed Eastern Europe, even indeed our good friends of Ukraine who like to think of themselves as at the gates of Europe. I think in a way the West is going to learn, potentially from the Putin Summit and potentially from other events, that diplomacy is not its gift to the world. it might need to learn how to do diplomacy from the rest of the world. Fantastic. So I've been talking almost non-stop now for 100 minutes, and haven't been a lot of live chats. If there's anyone on the live chat who does want to sort of quickly say hello, do so. I think I'm going to not necessarily, I might just cut out a little bit of a short segment from this live and produce it as a shorter video later in the week. And I do hope you do share, like, and subscribe to the video. I'm really looking forward to seeing your comments on the video and my little interpretation of the Putin Summit, both as, you know, a potentially constructive, potentially welcome new model of great power relationships, but also, I guess, where it fits in within, I guess, a broad interpretation of the history of how the world system keeps evolving. So I might wrap up the stream there. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all who commented on the previous video. Amazing, like 1,500 comments. It was really fantastic. And also, please leave a comment. Express your support for the work I'm doing here on the Burning Archive in ways that feel comfortable for you, whether that's clicking the like button, subscribe button, sharing it with friends and on social media, joining my free weekly email Substack. And if you're really interested in some of the ideas I've had here about geopolitics, I am also about to release my little sort of introductory course on geopolitics and history, seeing the geopolitical world more clearly with history. I might talk about that more in the next video because I think my voice is about to collapse after 2 hours of talking. But all those sort of links will be in the video description. And also, let me add also that coming up on my Substack this Saturday, I'm going to be doing I've got a little essay talking about a video that Jordan Peterson did alongside the historian Neil Ferguson about the German question, and whether Jordan Peterson really does have insights into that, whether Neil Ferguson really does have insights into that, whether the television show Babylon Berlin perhaps gives you a better insight into that. So that's and what also are some books that you can read that will give you a deeper understanding of the traumatic 20th century for Germany, and whether and how it sort of represents a way of engaging with both disasters and also the nature of history and all that kind of thing. So do check that out, and I'm actually releasing a little video discussing that on Friday night, so make sure you subscribe and you'll be able to check that out. And in the meantime, I think I might call it quits there. Thanks so much for watching. It's been great talking about these issues with you. I am super interested to hear what people have to say. And please contribute your comments and thoughts in a spirit of open and genuine inquiry. No, kind of nasty trolley type stuff, if that's okay, folks. And I'll see you next week for next week's live stream, which I have a feeling I might be discussing the historian of China, Rana Mitter, an incredibly interesting video he's just done recently about China and China's role in the world that actually connects to this whole discussion of whether China is trying to overthrow the world order or actually stabilize the world order, if in a new way that more genuinely reflects all the cultures of the world. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Rich. This is the Burning Archive.